Hello, King Culture parents and staff. Thank you for this invitation to talk to you about parenting, specifically in the fostering context. Are the principles the same as what you may have learned in the Evergreen Parenting course or in talks by you and Nessa? For you, who is one of the Evergreen Parenting coaches and also a foster parent with King Culture. Yes and no. Unfortunately, we can't just copy-paste the normal development and the normal milestones and expectations of children as it pertains to parenting into a situation where a child has been traumatized. And when we think trauma, we think all the very visible, tangible, horrific stories. And maybe the child in your care does not have one of those stories. But trauma can be very subtle. Trauma can simply be being removed from the familiar into the unfamiliar. None of you would think of God leading the Hebrew people out of Egypt as trauma, but it was. They didn't know who he was. They didn't know whether he could be trusted. They were in slavery, and yet that was what they were used to. That was their comfort zone. And when everything's got tough in the desert, we heard them saying, we'd rather go back to Egypt. When they were tired of being fed manna every morning, they went, it was better in Egypt. And you will see these signs in the children that you foster. And many adoptive parents share the same story. This child wants to go back to that horrific place that we rescued him or her from. What's wrong with this child? No, nothing's wrong. It's very normal. It's strange. It's new. And even the horrific can be more comforting just because it is what they know. So, seeing as we're on this topic of the Hebrew people and God, what does that have to do with the early stages of foster parenting or parenting for that matter? Well, it's a beautiful image of how you do it, because for the first 18 months of a baby's life, their task is to develop trust. So they're asking, is the world safe? Am I wanted here? And who are these people who are taking care of me? And, are they safe? Do they love me? Are they going to be present? Are they going to meet my needs? That's really what the first 18 months is about. And only after that, from 18 months to 3 years, do we really enter the discipline phase where children develop autonomy, or otherwise known as the ability to say no with their whole body. And you'll know how they do that. But that is a very important phase for them to enter, and it is our signal that we change gears from just being the safe, present, need-meeting person into the trainer who is going to train compliance and obedience so that they can be delightful to live with, so that they can turn out to be kids who can stay within boundaries, who can have respect, who can follow rules, and who can operate in society. But right at the beginning, that's not our task. So how do we learn from this for a foster or adoptive situation? Well, God did not lead a bunch of newborn babies out of Egypt. Some of them were adults, and yet he did the same thing with all of them, regardless of age. He established trust. Even with Moses at the burning bush, God had to first introduce himself. And there are two very beautiful components about his introduction. The one was him telling Moses who he was, giving Moses his name, saying, I am who I am. That just says so much. It's a whole sermon on its own, but I'll try not to veer off into that. But then also God said to him, Moses, I've also heard the crying of my people. So we see here that God is showing Moses his heart and his character. And that's what you're going to do right at the beginning of fostering a child. And if you didn't do it right at the beginning, this is the beautiful thing of the gospel. You get another chance to do that. You can go back and have a redo. And what God does now is he takes those people who would rather stay in Egypt, who thought that was their space, who maybe forgot all the stories they were told about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Or maybe you heard the stories but no longer believe them. And that may be the child that you have, a child who is disillusioned about what family can be, who doesn't know that love can be real, and who doesn't trust God, or any mother or father maybe. That is who you are going to lead out of Egypt into a promised land maybe. But at least you're going to be the caregiver in the desert, in that in-between space, until they can find a permanent place to live or return to a safe home. And God shows us how. He showed up in a visible form so that the people could know that He was always present. He did this by being or appearing as or providing, it doesn't really matter which, a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire by night. It's that shadow that you make sure, the little shade that your baby is in the car. You put the little blanket into the window, or at least that's how we used to do it when I had babies. Now there are these fancy little suction cup sheets that keep out the sun, but whichever way you do it, you keep the sun from burning your baby in the back seat. It's just a protective, nurturing, motherly action to provide this nation in the desert with a cool shade so that they wouldn't get scorched. And also just this evidence of presence and this clear guidance of where to go. And not just during the day, but especially and also during the night. And I know that the Bible doesn't talk to us about it, but I bet that pillar of fire at night wasn't just like a night light, a little security light in the middle of the night, reassuring them that they were not alone. It may even have given off some warmth, as fire usually does. And that's great because we know that nights in the desert can be freezing. And so think of yourself as the representative of God, and think of your assignment in this phase as being a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, and the provider of manna every morning. And maybe there's a little lesson in there that nothing you do needs to be super spectacular. It just needs to be predictable. It just needs to say, I will be there every day. There'll be manna tomorrow morning and the morning after. And we even see how God intentionally tells them not to pick up manna for 2 days. He's saying, listen, we are building trust, because out of trust is going to grow hope, and I'm going to show you that you can trust me. And he allows worms to get into the manna of day 2 so that they go through this beautiful rhythm of waking up in the morning, and there's the cloud, and there's the food for the day. And as the sun set, up comes the pillar of fire, and there's never any doubt that God is present and has their goodwill on His heart. And that is your role, because after doing this for a while, God said, now I'm going to show you my law. And if you do not keep it, there are going to be consequences. But He didn't start there, and neither can you. No matter how old the child is, even if your child is in that 3-year-old parenting phase where normally you would use, if you know the Evergreen terms, the saw and have really firm discipline, you can't do that until the child can answer, this person disciplining me right now is the person who will get up for me 5 times in the middle of the night when I'm sick. This is the person who will show up when I cry. This is the person who will meet my physical needs every single day. And only when that is established will discipline be received in a positive manner. We often see with children who have had trauma this need for that predictability. And any trauma program that you will encounter, or any book about healing trauma or healing from trauma that you will read, will have an element of this rhythm. And I'm going to quickly share 5 words, and one of them is routine, and think of that as a rhythm rather than 7 o'clock is this, 8 o'clock is that, 9 o'clock. It's this predictable rhythm of life. And these 5 things together create a safe home culture, and that's what you can start building now, regardless of the age of your child. A very important one is this routine or this rhythm, but then also ritual. Ritual are those sweet and lovely memories you have of your original family. If you had a happy childhood, we always went to the beach for Easter, or we always had fish and chips on a Wednesday night, or we always all got together in my parents' bed on a Sunday morning and had coffee and biscuit. That's how we did Sundays. So those are rituals, and they build a sense of belonging. Rules is a rule is a 4-letter word in the context of brand new foster kids, but rules, when they are there to protect, when they're like a little umbrella over your home, when they make sure that the child is also safe, such as we don't hurt one another, we don't break things, we listen to God, we listen to mom and dad, and there's a time for everything. 5 basic rules can govern the whole home and make life predictable, safe, emotionally and physically, and also establish what our values are going to be. And as for roles or responsibilities, that's another really important R. And I remember my parents getting an orphan over for the holidays once, and on the first night after dinner, my parents had him help wash the dishes, and I felt so sorry for him. I thought, in my little immature way, I thought, oh, he's an orphan and he gets to work at our house. That's awful. That's absolute abuse. No, it wasn't. It was my mom wisely knowing that when he can participate, I think his name was Rudy, when Rudy can participate and he can wash those dishes and he can put them in the drying rack and he can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Tonight I'm part of a family of 7, because here are the 7 plates in the drying rack, in the drip rack on the sink. Isn't that a beautiful picture of belonging? Is I can work, I can do a little task, and it proves that I'm a part of this family. That's super important. And remember, we were given work before the fall. It wasn't part of the punishment for sin. It was part of our identity as working and creating and productive people made in the image of a working, creative and productive God. So involve that little one in what you're doing around the house, without enrolling them in child labor, of course. And then another R that is so important is respect. And respect is especially important when a child comes into your home who has been traumatized, because trauma by definition violates boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, boundaries of ownership. Your no doesn't matter, your yes doesn't matter, your needs don't matter, you don't have your own space, you may not even have had one possession that was just yours. And so establishing respect in the form of boundaries is to help this child have a safe space, permission to say, no, I don't want a hug right now, permission to have a big personal space in order to feel safe, or coaching into understanding that maybe they can't sit on you physically 24/7, but gently after the bonding phase to slowly teach them how to respect time, dignity, personal space, property, and so forth. So those 5 R's, just again, will be rituals, routine, reasonable rules, roles or responsibilities, and respect. I hope that these principles make sense to you, and I know that your team will be there to answer more questions about that. May God bless you as you open up your home, and may you receive grace and wisdom on those days when children want to go back to Egypt. God knows all about that. So when that happens, that they can't see what's good for them, and they revolt against you, and they said what they said to God in the desert. Who is this Moses, and who made them boss over all of us? When you have those moments, remember that God knows all about that. And He knows how to bring children all the way through the grumbling to a promised land. And may every one of these children who have the privilege of being shaped by your love eventually end up in a beautiful promised land of love, meaning, destiny, and the knowledge of Jesus Christ.